Hey everybody, this is Perch, and it's been a busy day today. I actually went and visited four comic shops. I've got some business to get done and some friends to catch up with, and just trying to get some pieces sewn together to see how things are going. And so it's been interesting in the time of Corona. Going and visiting a bunch of shops in one day is just so much more painful. Like I used to have a great time of being able to go and hit up. I was always very efficient and proud of that. Like I could go out and for 1 hour I could get all the tasks done and everything else. You can't get anything done fast anymore. It's like it's just slow. Everything is slow and it's a pain. But anyway, a lot of good shops here up in the Seattle area. There's a lot of people who are trying hard and fighting to have their business. I would like to believe, having worked in different regions and keep a track in different regions, at the Pacific Northwest, Seattle area. Once you go a little further south and start to loop in Portland, it gets a lot more dodgy in a hurry. But in the Seattle area, people seem to want to help each other. It's a relatively, I'd say, I've just seen a lot of good behavior, good things by people. I've seen a lot of store owners help out each other, either with stock or with this or that. So there is a lot of. I think it's a group that tends to try and help each other out. I think that's cool. There's a new shop if you're in the Seattle area down kind of south that I saw today in the Tukwila or South Center Mall. It's a terrible location. I feel bad for the guy. He's in there trying to make it work, and it's this shop that is like you would never know it existed. Is the problem? You have to be pretty much going into J.C. Penney to know that the shop is there because it's tucked into this corner of a mall, and it's just I feel bad for the guy. He's got a lot of things going, but a couple observations now. Four shops in one day, and there is a consistent story that I'm seeing in all four shops. Here's a consistent observation. Now, granted, I am not speaking for the 1,200 or so shops around the world. I'm speaking for four, but all four had a similar tale being told. So for one thing, and actually I could list off there. I went to a shop in Bellevue, a shop in Factoria, a shop in Seattle, and then the shop in Tukwila. So four shops, one of which, of course, one in Seattle, Golden Age Collectibles. They bill themselves as being the oldest shop in the country. And I often joke about that because it doesn't seem like it should be true, but it is actually true. It is the oldest in the U.S. Golden Age Collectibles. Tony, kind of manager, really good guy. Love that guy. He's always been a huge supporter, and we'll give it to you straight as well. I think you can go in there, and it's one of these store owners, by the way, that if you go in there and you like, I want to reserve this to my pull box, and the comic comes in, they've switched the artist around, or you just don't like the run anymore, they'll take it out, no questions asked. They won't, you're not going to get stuck with that bill. They're like, no, we understand. We want you to be happy. The guy has a good behavior. The owners are always been very nice. The whole thing is good. But two pieces, with the exception of Golden Age Collectibles, which, by the way, as it's in the Pike Place market, so from a tourist perspective, it does a lot of its business being kind of comics and nostalgia. They've got a lot of stuff in there. They have games, they have movie posters, they have signed autographs of celebrities, and a lot of it's a tourist destination as much as a comic shop. Now, it's a very good comic shop, but it's got this built-in audience by where it is and everything else. Despite that, the pandemic has hit, of course, the Pike Place market and a lot of those places pretty hard. But the other three, you see this even more. And then we're going to loop back to the kind of initial observation. All of them, the one in Tukwila is probably the most striking. So it's new. I think it opened up in November, so it's relatively a new shop. It is the one in Tukwila was, I would say, one-sixth comics, heavy toys, models, nostalgia-based products, all that kind of stuff. The store was absolutely everything else dwarfed the comics. Comics were there on a wall. The comic was its name is a comic shop, and yet the toys and the other pieces were definitely the main attraction there. And from the people in the shop looking around, they were all at the toy section. Nobody was at the comic section. They were all looking around at that kind of stuff, which always were. I don't know. I just have I feel both that smart business. You can't rely on comics. I've said before, you should have no single part of your business be more than 20% if you can do it. It's hard to make that happen, but I get it. At the same time, I cringe a little bit at the wall of Funkos and the wall of toys. It's like, I always look at that and I'm like, this business owner is doing the right thing. And damn it, comics should not make you have to do it this way. It's just, this shouldn't be. But outside of that, the comics themselves. So here is my observation of four. There's in all four shops, including Golden Age Collectibles, all four, there was a absolute clear story being told by what was on the shelf and what wasn't. King in Black, by and large, seems to be selling very well. There were very few copies on the shelves, including the tie-ins. Stacks were smaller for King in Black. Seems to be okay. Stacks were very large in all shops for death metal tie-ins and things relating to death metal, which was striking because death metal's now been over for 3 months. But there was a lot of death metal. Like, you could go in there, and in fact, in two of the shops, I'm like, hey, do you still have all the issues? Yeah, all the issues of death metal are still available. They have them. You could get the whole run in 2 out of the 4 shops. And in fairness, I didn't ask the other 2 shops. But all of the Tales from the Dark Multiverse, there were a lot. Shops over-ordered on that from what was selling out the door. And probably because the Tales from the Dark Multiverse did really well during the original metal and kind of right after it, those were a strong seller they were picking up. But not this time. There were just so many copies on the shelf of speed metal and of like a lot of these. There were just stacks of them. And then this is the more alarming part, and probably what I want to talk about for the rest of the video. It was the indies. So huge stacks of crossover of we only see them, we only hear them when they're dead. We only see them when they're dead. Department of Truth. I was surprised to see Nocturnal. There were lots of copies of it on the shelf. And this is a couple days after. It was just released this week. So that's maybe not as alarming, but Something is Killing the Children. A lot of these Commanders in Crisis, oh my God, like huge stacks of this book. Radiant Black, big stacks of the book. I don't know if this is the best way to put it, but the indies that are being done by big name writers or creators that we've been hearing a lot about, there was so much supply. And the conclusion I'm drawing from this, and I sat and talked with one of the guys for a bit, it's like, yeah, the first issue did pretty well, and it was hyped. Like, it was super hyped that this was a superstar artist. They were coming in. There were some incentive programs, and the guy's like, I ordered it like I ordered the big Marvel and DC issues, and that was a terrible mistake. It didn't sell that well out the gate. And on top of that, the drop-off from number 1 to number 2 was far more severe. And the comment that was made was, it feels like a lot of these bigger name indie books are going, that it's almost recreating the speculator market for indies. And what's happening is that you get some variant covers and you get a bunch of big hype for that first issue. It sells okay, but then the drop off from issue 1 to issue 2, as we've seen with Marvel, can be more than 50% drop off. With the indies, it's like 80% drop off or 90. The guy who I was talking to, like Commanders in Crisis, he goes, "I've sold 2 copies of that. I ordered 50." That is a ludicrous overage. And it's like, yeah, the comment from the one in Factoria was, this feels a little bit like I'm getting flashbacks of Image in the 90s when we had just so many extra copies of this stuff. And it's like the buzz is there from the comic media, but it's not happening. And one guy, I think this was a guy down in Tukwila, made the comment of, yeah, I look online and I see Newsarama and Bleeding Cool. It's one of the very few times, by the way, I've ever heard Bleeding Cool actually mentioned in a shop. But I see these sites, and they are talking about how these indie books are just selling out, and they're the huge sellers, and it's just like amazing. Everybody wants it. He goes, I cannot move it. Like that is completely an alternate reality of what I've got here. And I get store after store, from tiny and new to, as I mentioned, the oldest comic shop in the area. A lot of these titles, tons of copies of them. They are just, they're there. The other comics that were there, I couldn't help notice, and no, I'm not saying this to just poke. There were so many copies of the X books on the wall, like the latest X-Men that has the three, Sync and X-23, Wolverine, and Darwin, and they are like there were like two piles of there had to be 100 copies on the shelf, and every shop so many of those. Excalibur, so many copies. Hellion, so many copies. All these books, they're just like there's clearly a delta between what people are ordering with the X books and what they're selling, because there was no shortage. Now again, 4 shops. Maybe I just happened to walk into 4 totally abnormal shops. Does not indicate what's going on in the rest of the country. In which case, if you're sitting here and you're like, this is not my shop's reality, cool. Get in touch with some of these guys. Write Golden Age Collectibles. Write Tony. Write any of these Jetpack Comics, or not Jetpack Comics. What am I saying? God, what was the name of the one in Tukwila? Anyway, write these guys. Look them up. Tukwila, Victoria, Bellevue Crossroads, and then Seattle, and reach out and say, hey, I hear you. I'm sold out of. We only see them when they're dead, or we only find them when they're dead. I'm sold out. I hear you have like 100 copies. Like make a deal. Don't get mad at the messenger. Like go make a deal, because I'm telling you, there are shop owners here with a lot of these comics that they will unload. Crossover is the interesting one, because that was one that surprised me the most. I keep hearing people say online that this comic is selling out. It's huge. It's just you can't keep it in stock. I know that's not quite true, because in the Facebook retailer groups I'm in, I keep hearing about how people have plenty of copies of that book. This was the first time seeing it for my own eyes. There were every single issue of Crossover on the shelf available at cover, tons. I don't remember if Golden Age Collectibles had the first issue, but the other 3 shops all did, and there was a lot of them. So the alarm bell I think that should be going off is, are we entering into a new speculator market? I think there's some worry that we are, because if that is how it begins. If we're seeing kind of these overinflated orders on indie books, and we see a drop off that is well in excess of 50% from issue 1 to issue 2, that indicates a very dangerous situation where the foundation is not here for these books, and that is very bad. I can't stress enough. That is a very bad situation. So, especially for a lot of these smaller publishers, they're trying to get things going for comic shops. Because what happens is this: the reaction, it's a double hit. The comic shop, which over orders, is stuck with way too many comics, and that generally means they're in for 2 months, maybe 3 months of pure pain, because this comic is, they've ordered too much, but it's coming in anyway. They got to buy it. Then the comic shop will dramatically cut their orders. They will go from, ordering 20 copies to 2. And at that point, the publisher faces a cliff. And that is happening. A lot of the smaller publishers right now are facing this really ugly cliff where it's like the bottom is dropping out. And you're kind of moving along. You're like, oh my goodness, I've got 5 or 6 hits on my hands. This is great. Things are going quite well. And then suddenly you come in, then here comes the next month's orders in June, and 90% of the orders are gone. That is going to hit you like a ton of bricks. To counteract that, smaller publishers are going to start shuffling in and out number one issues. They're going to you then fall into the trap of just hoping that you can keep the shell game going, where by the time one comic cools down, you've got another comic here to kind of pull the hype in again. But remember, comic shops, if they're facing a lot of extra stock on the wall from your publisher, it doesn't really matter what book you promote. The shop is going to start cutting orders across the board. That's going to hurt you. It's an interesting problem, and I was like I said, it was interesting to see that go down. What do you see in your local area? Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Let me know kind of your thoughts about how all this stuff works. What comics are you seeing stack up in giant piles at your shop? And thanks for listening.